Alrighty, welcome back, boys and girls. It's your main math man, Miss Shank, coming to you live from Summit Academy. And in this video, we're talking about that Unit 4, lesson number 4, working with those equations and those multi-steps that we have. So in the warm-up, it has different equations and solve for x. So what we're going to do for this one, we're going to solve for x. So all I have to do is I am going to add, so let me write it over here. So let me do x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x. And so what I can do is I can add the opposite to both sides, so that way I can get rid of some of these terms. And when I'm looking to get rid of terms that have a variable in it, since I have variables on both sides, I need to get all my variables to one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the opposite to the lower coefficient. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. So I have plus 4x to both sides. So now I have, this is going to be 5x minus 3 equals 2. And then what I can do is I can add 3 to both sides. So I can do plus 3 to both sides, get rid of those constant terms. So now I have 5x equals 5. Last step, always divide by the coefficient. So I'm divided both sides by 5. To get x by itself, so you should always end up with x equals a number, which is what we end up having. Alright, so we solve for x, and then it says in the second part, it says which of these have the same solution as equation 1. So if I'm looking at equation A, it has 2x minus 6 equals 4 minus 8x. And for this one, we could say, I can say it like this, I could say this is the same. I can say this is the same because they divided each term on both sides by 2. And since they divided both sides by 2, so notice if you're starting with this equation, divide by 2, we get x minus 3 equals 2 minus 4x. So notice how each of those terms are divided by 2. Similar idea for the equation B. We could say these are also the same. And we could say they subtracted 2 from both sides. Because what they did, notice how they got rid of that 2 on the right side, and they instead now have x minus 5 equals negative 4x. On equation C, we can say this one's also the same. This one's also the same because if they distribute the 2, they end up getting to get this side, this 2 minus 4x. So once you distribute the 2, you're multiplying each of those terms by 2, and you should end up with 2 minus 4x. So even though the equation is flipped, meaning the left and right side are switched, it is still the same equation. And for that equation D, this one is also the same. And we can say they subtracted x from both sides. All right. So again, make sure you can kind of compare, where I wrote out what they did to get this equation 1. Then in the next part, it says step by step. So it says it has 2 different people's steps on how to solve this equation. And if you notice, both of their answers are -8. So maybe they're both on the right track, but it says, are both solutions correct? And we have to explain why. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to say yes. When let me actually write it like, let me actually type this one out so that way it's easier to read. Easy there. Okay, so let's do like this, and let me do half size. Perfect. So let's say yes, and we can say when you substitute, make this the full length. When you substitute x back into the original equation, you get a balanced equation. Because each of those steps are correct, even though they took different ways of doing it. Like there's a couple different steps in there that they did, but both steps are correct, or both people's work are correct. However, the way you can check is we take and substitute that value back in for x. So like I'm saying this, I'm saying if you plug in x into the original equation, you should get the same value. So if you want to check, you should be able to check for yourself. And it says describe the steps that they took that are alike and some that are different. So let me do that. So let's do, how about this one? There we go. So some steps that are alike, we can say both students combined like terms of, and I could say when they took 14x minus 2x, they both got 12x. You can notice that in that that first step that they did. And then you could say some differences. You could say Lynn distributed the 3 times 5x plus 9 to equal 15x plus 27. And you could say a difference that they had was, let me do it like this. Say, but Claire, we'll stop clicking away. Claire, you'd say divided both sides by 3. So let me point out what I'm talking about. So what I'm referring to is this third line. So notice how in Lynn's step, they multiplied each of these terms by 3. So they did 5 times 3, or 3 times 5x and 9 times 3 to get 15x plus 27. However, what Claire did was in this step, they divided both sides by 3, so that way it was just canceled out on each side. So those are some similarities and differences. Then underneath of it, it says Mai and Noah also solved the equation, but some of their steps have errors. Find the incorrect step in each solution and explain why it is incorrect. So just remember that this is the original equation. And so each of the lines after it, so like this is step 1, this is step 1, step 2, so on and so forth. All right, clear that out real quick. See there. There you go. Okay. So if I look at Mai's work, I can see, well, they did that first step. They subtracted, or they combined like terms, the 14 and 2x. However, in this step right here, I can say in step, it'd be step 2, that's where the mistake is at. So let me actually do in red where the mistake is at. So let's say step 2. Mistake is in step 2. And we'll split it like this, and we'll say my subtracted 5x from both sides. And what they should have done is we could say you must first distribute, meaning multiply. So we could say they must first distribute the 3 on the right first. So since they notice how it's inside the parentheses, they can't just subtract it outside the parentheses, because they should have done minus 15x to both sides, but they only did minus 5x. So now I can split this down the middle. Let's look at Noah's work. Where's the mistake in Noah's work? So similar steps they distributed. So they did 3 times 5x and 3 times 9. So that step is good. However, we can say the mistake is in same spot but different mistake. So we can say in step 2. So what do they do from step 1 to step 2? Well, they subtracted 15x from both sides. So let me say that. So Noah subtracted 15x from both sides. And they should have gotten negative, what is that? Negative 3x on the left side. Because when they did it, they did 12x minus 15x. That should give you negative 3x. So that's where the mistake is at, both in the second step, but for different reasons. And now you're always looking at, when you're trying to find that mistake or find the error, you're trying to find what step or where the mistake was made. I didn't make the mistake in step 1. The result in step 2 is incorrect. So just make sure you're careful on that. All right. On the back, it says make your own step. It says solve these equations for x. So I'm going to do one of these, and then I'll show you the others. So let's say for this one, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3 and then by 2. Because if I look at my equation, notice I have a 3 in the denominator and a 2 in the denominator on the right side. What I need to do is I can have this. I multiply both sides by 3 and both sides by 2. I should end up with this. I'm going to have 2 times 12 plus 6x, because I got rid of the 3, but I still have to multiply by 2. On the right side, I should have 3 times 5 minus 9. Again, there's multiple ways on approaching this, but I wanted to show you at least one way. Make sure you can multiply inside the parentheses. So I'm multiplying 2 times each of these sets of parentheses. So let me do this on the side. So I have 2 on the outside. Draw your little box. I'm multiplying by 12 and by positive 6x. It's important to draw the signs, so that way you know what you're multiplying by. So I have 2 times 12 is going to be 24, and I have 2 times 6x is going to be 12x. Now what you can do is you can write your terms underneath of it. So I have 24 plus 12x equals, and then right here I can say this is going to be negative 4, so I just have negative 4 times 3, and that's going to be negative 12. So I have 24 plus 12x equals negative 12. Make sure you can get those constant terms on one side, since I have all my variables on one side as well. So I need to get rid of this 24, so subtract 24 from both sides. I can say, all right, I have 12x equals negative 36. Last step, always divide by that coefficient, so I need to divide both sides by 12. I should have x equals negative 3. If you want to check and make sure this answer is correct, you should be able to plug in your value back into your equation, so that way you can see if it's right. All right, for the second one, I will give you the step. So it's going to be multiply both sides by 3. So that's going to be your first step for that one. Your first step for number 3 is going to be distribute, meaning multiply, the negative on left side. And similarly, we can say for number 4, we're going to say we distribute the 3 on the left side. So what I want you to do now is, for these 3 choices, or for these 3 problems, pause for your turn. So try these out. Make sure you can check your own work. Be sure to ask questions as they come up. And as always, super slam that subscribe button.